Hello and welcome to Maximum No Doubt, the first talking book about the band. It was written and researched by Darren Brooks, music is by Amanda Thompson, and it's read by Michaela Power. You can check out our full catalogue on our website at www.chromedreams.co.uk.
I think that ska will remain underground. I don't know why, but the people who are into the traditional ska don't really like the commercial aspect, the commercial success of it. For some reason, they want to hold it back. We just play whatever music we feel like.
During the mid-1990s, when the UK was in the throes of the Britpop movement, with the likes of Oasis and Blur battling for supremacy at the top of the British charts, the US charts were equally saturated with guitar-based rock bands, but primarily of the post-Nirvana grunge sound-alike variety. As the record-buying public became increasingly tired of both sounds, which by this time had been done to death, there grew an increasing demand on both sides of the Atlantic for an injection of something fresh and dynamic. Enter an eclectic mix of ska, reggae, punk and pop, the likes of most of which had not been heard for a decade. Enter the preternaturally photogenic Gwen Stefani. Enter the worldwide smash hit #1 single that was Don't Speak. The music world was delighted to witness the arrival of the creators of this innovative new sound and welcomed No Doubt with open arms. After a decade of vertiginous ups and heartbreaking downs, the four-piece California-based band was no longer on the verge of making it. It was well and truly made. No Doubt left everyone from critics and commentators to DJs and music fans in little doubt that they had lots to offer and were here to stay. The music they produced was vital, and like that of their contrasting influences from the Clash through Madness to the Specials, it felt like the music would be with us long after the band had gone. In late 1996, and for much of 1997, No Doubt was the subject of global media attention, and rarely were their discs removed from CD players as the world rocked to their refreshing upbeat sound. No Doubt's musical entrance constituted the kind of welcome new broom that creeps up unannounced and almost unnoticed every once in a while, to sweep away the tired dead wood that preceded it. Such was their musical diversity that No Doubt were able to bring to the charts an interesting mix encapsulating the basics of ska, reggae light and Spanish guitar-tinged melodies, as well as paying cap-doffing nods to grunge and pop, thus keeping the stick-in-the-muds happy. The mid-90s obsession with grunge and 60s nostalgia was gradually giving way to a rebirth of positivism in popular music, and it was this type of injection into the charts of music that promoted fun and dynamism that No Doubt passionately pioneered. Don't Speak had brought the band much longed-for fame and international recognition. Their third and by far their most successful album sold in multi-millions, and their lead singer became the pin-up favourite of lads magazine readers everywhere. No Doubt had wrestled the music world to its knees and forced it to listen. They had stamped their lasting mark on the modern mainstream charts, and their strong work ethic had landed them exactly where they wanted to be, right in the spotlight. But it had taken real guts, hearty determination, and a huge side serving of unfaltering self-belief to get there.
I've always been kind of a girly girl. But it's funny because if I look back, I kind of grew up with all boys, you know, because the band's been going for so long now that's kind of been half of my life. And I realized that I haven't really led a girly girl life in a lot of ways. I'm kind of in a male-dominated, business.
Eric and Gwen Stefani, alongside brother Todd, were born and raised in Orange County, California, a suburb widely regarded for its affluence and conservatism. The youngsters' musical tastes, however, like that of their future No Doubt colleagues, reflected quite the opposite of parochial convention. It was in fact the contrast and range in musical aesthetics that would be integral to the success of No Doubt. The band was originally the inspired brainchild of Eric Stefani, a talented accordion and keyboard player, and perhaps crucially the elder brother of Gwen. Alongside the British-born bassist Tony Canal and vocalist John Spence, the boys' bumpy ride to fame and fortune officially hit the road in December 1986. The first 2 years were to be indelibly marked by tragedy, however. Less than a year after the band's genesis, Spence tragically took his own life, in the midst of great personal sorrow. The fledgling band's future was thrown into confusion and doubt, but after much soul-searching, both individual and collective, the difficult decision to press on was made, and the attempt to repair the band's shattered spirit began in earnest. It was in fact this unspeakable misfortune which led to Gwen's introduction into No Doubt. There were several other personnel changes forthcoming, as following the death of their vocalist, another original band member, Alan Mead, left to get married, allowing guitarist Tom Dumont to join in the spring of 1988. Additionally, Styxman Adrian Young took his seat at the drum kit in early 1989. The icing on the cake, though, was the striking young woman with blonde hair and strong vocals, who would prove to be the band's star signing. The recruitment of Eric's younger sister Gwen added a brand new dimension to the group, combining as she did all the basic elements that go to make up an ideal frontwoman. Her kinetic stage personality synthesised to perfection with her vocal talent and provided her with that indefinable magnetism at the microphone required by all great singers. Even at such an early stage, it was obvious that Gwen possessed charisma in abundance, and it was she who could make the crucial difference between the band attaining mid-table success or genuine title-challenging credentials. And then, of course, there was the music. Like all youngsters destined to grow up into professional musicians, each band member had developed their own personal musical tastes and influences, and as they each contributed to the songwriting process under the aegis of chief songwriter Eric, their collaborative efforts produced an original mix of sound. Gwen and Eric's roots were undoubtedly in ska, the 80s British band Madness proving to be an early passion for Eric, whilst the teenage Gwen was swept along by the majesty of the sound of music. Tony Canal worshipped 80s music, and his CD collection included the likes of the Human League, Prince and U2. Tom Dumont, prior to joining No Doubt, had been part of a heavy metal band, and as a youngster had listened to music by bands such as Black Sabbath and Kiss. Different influences were again brought to the table courtesy of Adrian Young. A child of hippie parents, he was introduced to the music of Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin at an early age, both of which remained lasting passions for him. As a result, the songs No Doubt collectively wrote and produced reflected their disparate tastes, ensuring that in the unlikely event of No Doubt failing, then it would do so in dynamic and original style. Failure, though, was something that No Doubt had agreed was not an option.
It's strange that you have to be validated just by, like, the music industry gives validation by being charted and stuff like that, but we've always felt very fortunate to be in this band because we've always had a great following on the west coast of the United States, so we've always felt really lucky to be in this band.
No Doubt soon made themselves regulars on the live circuit, and as a result quickly rose to the fore of the music scene in their small corner of California. Basing themselves in Anaheim, the band had set about creating a reputation as a quality live band. Strongly motivated by ska, as well as the ideology of punk music, their performances were energetic affairs, with self-penned songs giving them a creative edge over the many bands trying to win themselves an audience with endless cover versions. No Doubt had a new original sound, assembled and blended from a wide enough range of influences to make the sum greater than its component parts, and producing sparkling vitality and spirit live. As the dark days following the distressing death of John Spence began to slowly dissipate, it became obvious that the uplifting engagement in their own music would in itself prove essential to the band's healing process. Gwen first flexed her vocal cords on behalf of her brother's band at the perennial launchpad for many a future star, the talent contest. The song was on the radio, a popular ska-based tune which would become the band's first self-financed single. Although the performance was strong and full to the brim with potential, the band still had some way to go before companies came calling. No Doubt refused, however, just to sit around waiting for this to happen. They wisely concentrated on spreading the word with constant touring, collecting an ever-increasing fan base along the way. Their performances continued to be a highly charged experience, with an unceasing energy and a potent stage presence provided by Gwen. Soon they'd established a healthy reputation as quality performers, winning them a hardcore fan base, as well as the endorsement of many bands that queued up to enlist No Doubt as an opening act. These included the likes of Ziggy Marley and the Melody Makers, and even the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It was at this stage that the band experienced life in a recording studio for the first time, initially producing songs for a demo tape before going on to record further tracks intended for a self-financed album release. Fate would step in at this point, however, in the form of a record deal, thus decreeing that for the time being at least, No Doubt would keep its personal assets in the bank. When the long-awaited record executives did beat a path to their door, the timing proved to be something of a mixed blessing. The musical climate in the early 1990s was far removed from that which No Doubt was seeking to produce. Grunge music was at the very height of its popularity and dominated the playlists on American mainstream radio. The melancholy introspection that was the stock-in-trade of grunge was diametrically opposed to the musical ideology of No Doubt, as the band and their music sought to espouse a sense of hope with buoyant live performances. Their stimulating brand of modern pop music, drawn from a wide palette of genres, seemed at odds with the mood of much of the pop music of the time. The question was, could No Doubt see off the competition and persuade the world that they were ready for a sweeter-tasting antidote? The band was confident that their raw power and sheer determination to succeed would ensure any gap in the highly competitive market would be theirs for the taking.
We're all kind of 26 and 9 years into it going, maybe we should try going back to school or get a new job, but we got our childhood extended for a little bit longer.
The big break, as it's often called, finally arrived in 1991. No Doubt had in fact been writing songs at a prolific rate for years and was finally in the process of recording many of them in Southern California when highly regarded A&R man Tony Ferguson convinced the band to sign a record contract with Interscope Records. Before the band put pen to paper, however, and having had limited studio recording experience, they begged the company to allow them to re-record those songs they had recently been working on. Given the extra finance and allowed access to improved recording facilities, Gwen and the boys convinced Interscope of the benefits of such re-recording and did so, producing the songs to a higher quality and to their increased satisfaction. It was then, though, that the band felt somewhat abandoned by Interscope, who, having gone to great pains to convince No Doubt to commit to the label, mysteriously and without explanation withdrew their support for an album release. They offered little in the way of promotion of the album, and mainstream rock radio stations virtually ignored the band. Valuable radio play seemed to come at that time only from a limited number of student radio stations. Through no fault of their own, the band found themselves in something of a quandary. The only way they could sufficiently promote the album would be by getting back onto the live circuit once more. The financial implications for such a high-profile tour could be serious, though, as only limited tour support was forthcoming from an indifferent Interscope. Gwen, Eric and the boys were faced with the sobering choice of either watching No Doubt and all their hard work fade away, or plough much of their own money into the tour. They decided upon the latter and eventually funded, to a large extent, the recording of their debut record and its promotional tour. Record company politics swept to one side, the band finally went on the road and the fans were given their first opportunity to hear the new material. Despite the apathy expressed by their record company, No Doubt had achieved a respectable critical reputation and was even able to book quality opening acts of their own, including popular bands like Ugly Kid Joe and Rage Against the Machine. However, with the album still awaiting release and in spite of the anticipation by their fan base, the negative energy created by Interscope did not bode well for the success of the record. The hard work that the band put into their debut record was manifest, both in its writing and recording. Consisting of 14 completely original tracks written entirely by the five-piece, led by chief songwriter Eric, the eponymously titled disc was finally released to a salivating fan base in 1992. As a debut band with restricted backing from their paymasters and in the face of such heavy-hitting competition in the whole of the grunge movement, the record was not expected to sell particularly well beyond the band's established market. This proved to be a correct assumption, as the disc initially clocked up disappointing sales. There were several plus points, of course, which suggested the band had more than one record inside of them. Its celebratory agenda had generally gone down well and received positive reviews, perhaps suggesting that the music world was now ready to hear something other than perpetual teenage angst pouring from their speakers. In spite of poor sales and their apparent disregard for the band's talents, Interscope parted with industry convention and decided to stick with them. This, however, proved to serve no particular advantage, as Interscope did little to encourage No Doubt to return to the recording studio and produce a follow-up album. The record company was understandably nervous, but the band was desperate to write and record more of their songs. When the frustration with Interscope failed to relent, No Doubt's determination would see them create a batch of songs that would ultimately set them on the road to personal triumph and justification.
And it's a party, like everybody's invited and there to party and everybody's there on the same level.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're not just a party band. We definitely we're into having a good time and entertaining people. We're entertainers.
The cool reception bestowed upon the recording debut might have wounded No Doubt, but they were far from being on the canvas. With a second major label album still some way in the future, the band persisted in their hunt for live audiences around the country, constantly honing their act to perfection and, just as importantly, keeping themselves in the public eye. They also spent much of early 1993 creating new songs, even building their own studio in which to begin recording under their own steam, totally exasperated at Interscope's continued prevarication. The band was on a creative roll and impatient to capitalise on their songwriting energy. They had accumulated in excess of 60 new songs, some of which were earmarked as potential tracks for their second album. And with this huge amount of material at their disposal, they finally gave up on Interscope and spent one intensive weekend in their brand new studio, recording enough songs for a full-length album. At this point, the band was fortuitously introduced to Paul Palmer, an Interscope sound engineer who had expressed personal interest in mixing their next record. Palmer was also the owner of Trauma Records, a subsidiary of Interscope, and upon hearing the tracks they'd already recorded, he insisted their next release be with Trauma. Featuring a host of those songs penned between 1992 and 1994, the Beacon Street collection was released in early 1995 and was preceded by two 7-inch singles. The first was Squeal, a limited edition on vinyl only, followed by the non-album track My Room Is Still Clean, written by Tony Kanal and recorded live in California in February 1993. The second single, again made available only on vinyl, featured two Eric Stefani tracks, Doghouse and You Can't Teach a Dog New Tricks. The album was afforded a much warmer greeting than their previous offering, despite the fact that its content didn't differ greatly from their less well-received debut record. Like all great bands, though, No Doubt had always possessed great self-belief in their work, managing to stay positive through thick and thin, perhaps requiring even more resolve than most other bands considering the tragic circumstances in which their original vocalist had been lost. Interscope, thanks in part to the strenuous efforts of Paul Palmer, finally began to sit up and take notice of the little band from Orange County they'd signed almost 4 years earlier. The Beacon Street collection was self-justification for No Doubt. They'd always held conviction in their music, a vital component that undoubtedly contributed to eventually lifting the group out of the mediocrity and into the realms of greatness. And that greatness would finally be fully realised with the next album, a co-release between Trauma and Interscope later that year. As it transpired, the Beacon Street collection was merely a pleasant aperitif to what would be a very tasty meal.
Everybody wants to be nice to us now and be our friends. We're like, okay, tomorrow you probably won't like us, but that's cool, we'll take it while we can get it.
Over the busy years of live performances, each individual member of No Doubt had also proved beyond doubt that they were writers of quality songs. A pitfall of many such prolific outfits is, of course, the potential dip in form. This, however, didn't seem to apply to No Doubt, as the quality of music definitely matched its quantity on every level. Of the 60 songs they'd stockpiled in the 2 years spent recording and performing, 10 had found their way onto the Beacon Street album, giving them a hefty clutch of tunes to cherry-pick for further release. Of those remaining songs, a final track list of 14 was shaped and prepared for their second major label album. However, before the record was unveiled, there was to be yet a further shift in manpower, as the band found itself sadly, if not entirely unexpectedly, reduced to a four-piece. No Doubt's founding father, Eric Stefani, had for some time been juggling his music commitments with a burgeoning career as an animator. It was during the recording of the new album in 1995 that Eric felt a final choice between the two had to be made, and unfortunately for his colleagues, the cartoons were the victors. Gwen would now be without her guiding light, and the band without their primary songwriter. Eric, though, had contributed heavily to the forthcoming record already, and left his group in a healthy state with a batch of outstanding songs for the next album. Meanwhile, Eric concentrated on his new line of work, quickly experiencing recognition in this chosen field too, and even being asked to contribute to the popular animated series The Simpsons, an ultimate accolade. With such a creative force within the group having moved on, it was inevitable that the remaining members would consider their future as a band. Despite Eric's departure, however, this was an exciting time to be part of No Doubt. There was great anticipation for the new album, now mixed and ready for release, and naturally feeling a passionate commitment to those fans who'd kept them motivated during the lean years, they decided to carry on. With her brother gone to pastures new, Gwen found herself destined to front the band. The pressure that was unexpectedly thrust upon her could have been daunting, especially since the band had set such high standards for themselves, following the surprise critical success of the Beacon Street collection. The strength and depth of quality of their next release, though, perfectly complemented the previous album, and their confidence in it did much to settle the nerves generated after Eric's departure. Released just months after Beacon Street, it was agreed the new album would be called Tragic Kingdom. As with the previous offering, there was a general thumbs aloft from the music press and die-hard fans alike. But once again, the album was largely ignored by the wider record-buying public. The only slight departure from their previous two discs was with Gwen's vocal, which was pushed higher in the mix, but the band's notorious eclecticism was once again baked to perfection. The hybrid they'd created this time included horns, sharp blasts of punk guitar, the inevitable cocktail of ska and reggae, all combining to produce an album of psychedelic sonic power. The album's inaugural single was entitled Just a Girl, and with its artful and parodic slant on life as a girl in the modern world, it managed to achieve the marketing department's holy grail, that of heavy rotation on music television. Alongside the substantial radio play it began to garner, it looked like the single was going to be responsible for turning around the commercial fortunes of its parent album. As was becoming customary in contemporary music promotion, the single was released in multiple formats and containing a variety of treats for the regular fan. There were variously songs from previous albums, live versions of the title track, and even a CD video on the US pressing, an increasingly popular marketing tool. In stark contrast to their debut album, Tragic Kingdom was furnished with a full complement of marketing assistance, and with the help of such hard-hitting promotional activity, Just a Girl crashed into the all-important Billboard Top 30, increasing sales of Tragic Kingdom along the way. The second song lifted from the record, Spiderwebs, was destined to become a firm live favourite with the fans in arenas around the world, in spite of the fact that it had initially been made available only in Europe. Tragic Kingdom was the end product of 8 years strength-sapping stage work and impassioned songwriting. In that time, the band had become an incredibly strong and effective live act, and their musicianship was second to none. A top 30 single and a slowly rising mainstream chart album would be a big enough achievement for many bands in a highly competitive industry. Not so for No Doubt, however, who felt there was even more to gain. 1996 came to a close with No Doubt having conquered their home country. Tragic Kingdom had spent a total of 9 weeks at the pinnacle of the US album chart, and their next single release had already made its mark on much American mainstream radio. It was with this song that their resolve under the microscopic gaze of worldwide fame would be really put to the test. The song would help take them to the very top of their profession and launch their album, and indeed their very careers, into the stratosphere. Make no mistake, No Doubt had entered the building.